Frank Joyce, Michigan labor political and labor activist, former PR director with the United Auto Workers, contributor to Alternet and Salon, wrote a brilliant piece that was over at Alternet. The future of life depends on bringing the 500-year rampage of the white man to a halt. Frank, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm well. Happy holidays. 500-year rampage of the white man. Tell us about this.
Well, the fact of the matter is that, we live in an era that started with colonialism, and that colonialism created the first global economy. That was the slave trade. And from the slave trade emerged a particular form of capitalism. My friend Jim Lawson, the Reverend Jim Lawson, calls it plantation capitalism. And that's the capitalism that has now evolved to the situation that we find ourselves in today. The problem with plantation capitalism in 2015 is that it is a menace to all life on the planet, including yours and mine, and my 2-year-old granddaughter.
So back when Greece had when there were more slaves in Athens than there were citizens, it was not so much a problem for the world because it was just Athens. But now, is that what you're saying?
It's not just the scope of it. Yes, that's correct, Tom. But it's this combination of the capitalist profit-driven economic system with skin color and race. That's what made slavery in the United States in particular, not that there wasn't slavery in Brazil and in the West Indies and so on and so forth, but this plantation capitalism again, or race-based global capitalism, sadly, it's white people who invented white people. It's white people who invented the idea that we're white, they're black, we're superior, they're inferior, and that ideology, once it was out of the bottle, is proving very difficult to get back in. I don't think it's impossible. I wrote my article to be hopeful, actually, and cited the role of whites, myself included, in the civil rights and anti-war movements, but also whites were abolitionists back in the day, and whites fought against apartheid in South Africa. And so we have definitely a role to play in creating a world that is better and more sustainable than the one we have now.
Yeah. What any theories? I had this. I've mentioned this on the air before. Back many years ago, I was interviewing Professor Jack Forbes. He's a Native American professor of Native American Studies at UC Davis. He's since passed on, but I wrote about him in my book Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight back in '96. And he wrote a book called Columbus and Other Cannibals, which is an absolutely brilliant indictment of Columbus and those of his ilk who basically came and destroyed the indigenous people of the Americas. And right. and we were having this conversation. We were talking about this history of this, and here's this tall, stately, elderly Native American man with a long ponytail that went down to the middle of his back, braided. I'm just such an elegant man, and very, very professorial as well as brilliant. And he just suddenly stopped, and almost as almost as a rhetorical question, but he was like, words to the effect of, what is it with you white people? What is it that came out of the Caucasus Mountains that has led to all of this over the last 3,000 to 5,000 years?
Well, it's a very good question. And here's the good thing for you and me and your listeners and readers of this article and other things. My piece starts with the op-ed in the New York Times about learning the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about Woodrow Wilson.
Who was a flaming racist.
Who was a flaming racist, but who many people, including, I'm sure, many African-American people, were totally unaware of that. And part of the point I'm trying to make is we need to be much more skeptical about the history that we have been taught and how it has contributed to this identity and these blind spots, if you will, in which it's very hard for us to understand the world the way it really is. And as part of the white ethos is, well, we're scientific and we're truth-based and all of that. Well, not when it comes to our own history. The good news, again, is that we're in a new phase. Thanks to the gains of the civil rights movement, there are now scholars of all kinds, including white scholars, who are writing brilliant work about our own history. I think of the new book by Ned and Constance Sublett, which is titled The Slave Coast, which, if slavery was a crime, and it surely was, this book is the ultimate whodunit of how it came to pass. I think of Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's book, which I quote in my piece, an indigenous people's history of the United States. If you'll indulge me a plug here, Tom, I also want to put in a word for a book I recently co-edited called The People Make the Peace, Lessons from the Vietnam Anti-War Movement, because it talks about the problem I talk about in my piece on Alternet yesterday in a more international context, but in particular in the history of what the United States did to Vietnam. Yeah. Martin Luther King said a long time ago that the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, and it's more true now than it was then. But here's what's different, and here's what I hope comes through. We not only can fix this, we have to fix it, because it's one thing when whether it's slavery, whether it's Jim Crow, whether it's whatever, is just
genocide of Native Americans.
Right. When that is just barbarity of human behavior towards other human behavior, but we are putting all of life at risk. This system, if it continues to destroy oceans, to pollute the air, to destroy water, and to leave us the prospects for nuclear catastrophe, pandemics, eco-catastrophe, economic collapse, you and I are old enough. We're only seeing the beginning of this. But anybody that has a grandchild or even a child needs to really stop and think about what's the price we're paying. A lot of the comments on my piece were predictable, but we put a man on the moon and we have iPhones and we invented television and all of that, all of which is true. And, I like...
Well, that wasn't exclusively white people, that...
Well, that's for sure. That's the first problem. But the second problem is at what price? And just because that got us to this point. Stephen Hawking said something recently that has really stayed with me, which is just because human aggression served an evolutionary purpose for a few million years doesn't mean it's serving an evolutionary purpose now. Right. Same for white supremacy.
Yeah, and there's something going on. I mean, who are the mass shooters, right? I mean, you look at the last 1,000 mass shootings in the United States, since the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the only person of color I can remember is John Malvo in Washington, D.C. I mean, everybody else was a white guy.
Well, and as you pointed out, and it's relevant to mention here, this idea that we can kill 3 million Vietnamese and untold Laotians and Cambodians and people in Afghanistan and Iraq and all over the world.
Drop nuclear bombs on the Japanese.
Yeah, no blowback. None of that violence comes home to roost. We're a very violent culture.
Yeah. Frank Joyce, brilliant writing. Your piece is titled, The Future of Life Depends on Bringing the 500-Year Rampage of the White Man to a Halt. It was on Alternet on December 20th. And Frank, thanks a lot for dropping by today.
Thank you.
Good talking. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.